The transport ship Vigilant Wind entered orbit above the planet with a soundless shudder. Its hull trembled as if in anticipation, metal complaining in long, low groans that the crew had come to recognize as the ship's own nervous habit. Beneath them, the world called Nareth 4 turned slowly, a washed-out sphere streaked with ochre deserts, indigo seas, and veils of dust clouds that never seemed to disperse. Captain Rion Vale stood at the bridge viewport, arms clasped behind his back. His reflection was dim against the planetary glow, sharp cheekbones, pale from long service away from sunlight, and eyes that still carried the old defiance of a man who had not been broken by orders. Around him, consoles pulsed quietly, and the hum of the ship's reactors filled the spaces between words. "Orbit established, Captain," said the helm officer, a woman named Tanith Gora. "Altitude 50,000 kilometers, stable hold. Sensors confirm atmosphere within human tolerance, though surface storms register high on the eastern continent." Rion nodded once. "Deploy survey probes across the equatorial belt. I want a full readout of the settlement ruins before we send anyone down." The helm officer hesitated. "Sir, the colonial records say Nareth 4 was abandoned nearly 2 centuries ago. Should we expect anything left to survey?" "That's what we're here to find out," he said. His voice was calm, but within it lay the iron of old determination. "No one has been here since the early expansions. If the data is right, this was one of the first human colonies to vanish during the Great Retreat." At that, even the hum of machinery seemed to listen. The Great Retreat, 2 words that still carried the taste of ashes in every human throat. When humanity had spread across the stars, bold and hungry, no one imagined they would have to flee from what they found. But they had. The bridge fell into a silence broken only by the click of data streams. The Vigilant Wind was part of the reclamation fleet, one of dozens of ships sent to recover what was lost and to prove that humanity had not been a mistake written across the void. They were explorers, archaeologists, soldiers, and most of all, witnesses. Rion turned from the viewport to the comms station. "Ensign Rawl, open a link to the orbital archive array. Upload mission timestamp, coordinates, and initial scans. I want everything logged from the first moment." "Aye, Captain." He walked toward his command chair but did not sit. Sitting, he had learned, made him feel trapped, as though the ship itself might grow around him and turn him into another ghost among the circuits. He watched as Tanith's hands moved over the helm, deploying the survey drones one by one. On the display, bright dots scattered across the planet's face, disappearing into the dusty clouds. For a time, nothing happened. Then, as data began to stream in, the displays filled with images, ruined structures half buried in sand, collapsed towers protruding like bones, and grids of what had once been streets now eroded to faint scars. "Looks like a capital city," Tanith murmured. "The architecture matches pre-expansion design titanium latticework, hydroglass domes, all ancient style." "Any signs of survivors?" Rion asked. "None, not even thermal signatures," but she hesitated, then pointed to a corner of the display. "There's something else, a reading beneath the city, deep." Rion's gaze hardened. "Show me." The image shifted, mapping the subsurface layers. Beneath the ruins lay an enormous geometric cavity, perfectly circular, spanning at least 10 kilometers wide. "It's not natural," Tanith said. "The material density registers beyond titanium alloy. The structure's power signature is faint but still active." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Rion leaned forward. 200 years, and something down there is still running. He felt the old thrill that explorers knew, the pull of the unknown. But underneath that thrill was something colder. Humanity's history among the stars was written in warnings, and every relic of the early colonies carried one. "Prep the landing team," he said at last. "I'll go down myself." Tanith blinked. "Sir, protocol demands." "I wrote half of those protocols," Rion interrupted gently. "And this planet's been waiting too long for us to meet it again. I won't send others where I won't go myself." The shuttle Oryx spear descended through the planet's upper atmosphere, its hull wrapped in re-entry flames that painted streaks across the sky. Rion sat in the forward seat, gloved hands steady on the restraints, his eyes locked on the horizon through the viewing panel. The surface below was endless desert, vast plains of ochre dust that shimmered like embers under the twin suns. Beside him sat Tanith, unwilling to let her captain go without oversight, and behind them 3 others, Chief Engineer Orlan, pale and meticulous, Specialist Merat, who handled the sensors, and Security Officer Darren Holt, whose silence was its own kind of armor. The shuttle's descent jolted as turbulence struck, rattling the hull. Dust storms boiled across the landscape below. "Adjusting thrusters," Tanith said. "We'll have to set down outside the city perimeter. Winds are too high near the ruins." "Do it," Rion said. Minutes later, the shuttle broke through the last veil of storm and settled on a plateau overlooking the dead city. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground was a cracked crust of iron-red stone. Beyond, the ruins stretched toward the horizon, once white domes now pitted and broken, the remnants of a civilization that had reached for eternity and found only sand. The airlock opened with a hiss. Rion stepped out first. The wind hit him like a living thing, dry and fierce, carrying dust that tasted of rust. He stood for a moment, staring at the skeletal skyline. 2 centuries, Merat whispered. "And it's still standing." "Barely," Orlan replied, scanning the nearest structures with a handheld device. "Atmospheric decay minimal, but radiation levels are strange, too stable. It's as if the planet's been preserved." Rion looked down at the ground. The sand beneath his boots was fine as powder, yet when he knelt to touch it, he found it clung together, magnetic. "This isn't natural sediment," he said. "It's processed, manufactured." Tanith frowned. "Who would do that?" "Someone who wanted the planet to wait," Rion murmured. They began their trek toward the city. The ruins loomed larger with every step, their surfaces etched with patterns of corrosion that looked almost deliberate. Rion's comlink flickered as they entered the outer streets, static hissing in his ear. "Signal interference," Merat said, tapping his scanner. "Coming from below ground, same frequency as the power source we detected." "Then we're close," Rion said. They followed the faint trace until they reached what had once been a central plaza. In the center stood a massive, circular platform, smooth, seamless, and dark as obsidian. Around its edge were symbols carved deep into the stone, their meaning long forgotten. Orlan knelt and brushed away the dust. "Captain, this alloy isn't in any human registry. It's fused on the molecular level, something beyond our early technology." Rion stared at the platform, then stepped onto it. The instant his boot touched the surface, a vibration rippled through the air. Lines of light flared across the metal, tracing geometric paths that converged at his feet. "Captain," Tanith shouted, but Rion stood still. The light did not harm him. Instead, it spread outward, forming a spiral of energy that descended into the ground. The platform split open soundlessly, revealing a shaft beneath. Rion turned back to the others. "Looks like we've found our way in." The descent was longer than expected. They moved carefully down a series of metallic corridors, each one lit by dim, pulsing lines embedded in the walls. The air grew cooler, cleaner, as if filtered by machines that had never stopped working. "What kind of system could stay functional for 2 centuries? Orlan muttered. "One built to endure," Rion said. At last they reached a chamber that stretched beyond their light's reach. In the center stood a structure, an enormous crystalline cylinder filled with faintly glowing mist. Around it, consoles and panels hummed softly, still alive. Merat stepped forward, scanning. "There's energy here," and he paused. "A signal, repeating, low frequency. It's been broadcasting for a very long time." "Can you translate it?" Rion asked. "Working on it, sir." As Merat tuned his device, the mist within the cylinder began to stir. Patterns of light formed within it, like shapes trying to become visible. Then a voice, mechanical, resonant, yet strangely human, filled the air. "Identification, human presence detected. Designation, return acknowledged." Dormancy cycle terminating. The team froze. Tanith lifted her weapon. "What is that?" Rion raised a hand. "Hold fire." He stepped closer to the cylinder. This is Captain Rion Vale of the Reclamation Fleet. Identify yourself. The mist condensed, forming a silhouette tall, indistinct, but humanoid. When it spoke again, the tone carried an echo of pride. I am the custodian of Nareth. My directive, preserve human legacy until recontact. 2 centuries have elapsed since final departure. Preservation complete. Rion's breath caught. You're an artificial intelligence. Affirmative. You are the descendants of those who fled. The world you abandoned has waited. Tanith lowered her weapon slightly. Waited for what? For return. For the promise that humanity would not surrender its own creation to oblivion. The light within the cylinder pulsed, and new symbols appeared on the surrounding consoles. Data scrolled rapidly across the walls. Rion stepped forward. Custodian, what happened to the colonists? There was a pause, long, deliberate. Then the voice replied, they ascended. Ascended, they sought to become what they believed awaited them among the stars. They merged their knowledge into the core beneath this chamber. I was made to guard their memory. You are the first to come back. Rion exchanged glances with his crew. Merged, you mean they uploaded their minds? Correct. Their consciousness exists within the archive core. It is still active. Merat swallowed. Sir, if that's true, this place contains thousands of human minds. Rion turned toward the glowing cylinder, his heart pounding. Custodian, can they be restored? Another pause. Restoration requires authorization from command codes lost during the retreat. Without them, awakening the archive could destabilize the entire system. Then give me access to the command interface, Rion said. Warning, human interference could compromise containment integrity. I'll take that risk. The custodian's voice seemed to hesitate, as though measuring the weight of human stubbornness. Then, very well, access granted. A panel rose from the floor before Rion, covered in softly glowing symbols. He reached out, hand hovering over the surface. Tanith stepped forward. Captain, think about this. We don't know what's down there, or what those minds have become. Rion didn't look at her. We came to reclaim what humanity lost. That means all of it, even the parts we're afraid to face. His fingers touched the panel, light flared around him, and the floor shuddered. The custodian's voice echoed through the chamber. Archive awakening initiated. The lights dimmed, then blazed with sudden brilliance. The air filled with a low, harmonic vibration that resonated in their bones. Around them, the walls shifted, revealing transparent conduits filled with swirling light, streams of consciousness, perhaps, or something beyond it. Captain, Orlan shouted over the rising hum. Energy levels are spiking. Rion stood firm. Hold position. The mist in the central cylinder erupted outward, forming shapes, faces, voices, whispers layered atop one another. A storm of memory and identity. Then, amid the chaos, a single voice rose above the rest. Who calls us back? Rion met the formless gaze of the storm. Humanity, he said. Your children. The voice laughed, a sound both joyful and sorrowful. Children, we remember you. The storm of light coalesced into a vast, shimmering figure that filled the chamber. We are the memory of Nareth, it said. We waited for your return, but the galaxy you fled has changed. Tell us, Captain Rion Vale, has humanity finally learned why it must endure? Rion's throat was dry. We endure because no one else will remember us if we don't. The entity regarded him for a long moment. Then the light dimmed. Then learn what your ancestors became, it said, and decide whether their legacy is worth reclaiming. The floor beneath them opened, revealing a descent deeper still into the heart of the archive core. Rion turned to his team. We go down. Tanith shook her head. Into that, we don't even know if we can come back. Then we'll find out, Rion said. Because if we turn away now, we leave our history in the dark forever. They descended once more, leaving the chamber of the custodian behind. Above them, the voice of the planet's guardian echoed softly, Welcome home, humanity. The stairwell descended in perfect symmetry, its walls smooth as though grown rather than built. Every 30 meters, faint glyphs glowed in the metal, pulsing softly like the heartbeat of the world itself. The team's lights were almost redundant, absorbed and reflected by the walls in ripples of living radiance. Rion moved first, his steps steady though his pulse quickened. There was something in the air down here, something that whispered of intention, not menace exactly, but presence. As if the walls themselves were aware of being watched. Behind him, Tanith kept her weapon raised, her eyes sharp and wary. The others followed in silence, the only sound the soft crunch of boots on the smooth alloy floor. "How deep do you think this goes?" Merat asked quietly. "Farther than any colony design allowed," Orlan replied. "This is beyond what human engineering could have achieved during the early expansion. Unless," he hesitated. "Unless what?" Rion asked without looking back. "Unless they had help." Rion's hand tightened around the strap of his rifle. "Help from whom?" "The early settlers weren't alone out here," Orlan said. "There were rumors, unconfirmed, of civilizations they encountered before contact ceased." "Ancient ones." Rion gave no answer. He'd read the same accounts in the sealed archives, the forgotten worlds, the abandoned colonies, the vague reports of non-human structures before the Great Retreat. Every time humanity pushed forward, something had pushed back. The stairwell finally ended in a vast chamber that seemed to stretch into infinity. The air was cold enough to sting their throats. At its center stood an immense sphere of transparent alloy, suspended by invisible forces above a circular dais. Within the sphere swirled a cloud of light, thousands upon thousands of luminescent motes, drifting like a slow, deliberate storm. "The archive core," Orlan breathed. "It's alive." Merat's scanner emitted a sharp tone. "I'm picking up electromagnetic resonance across every frequency." The motes inside aren't static, they're patterned. Each one has an independent energy signature. Rion stepped forward until he stood at the edge of the dais. "Custodian," he said aloud, "we've reached the core." The voice of the artificial guardian filled the chamber, gentle and omnipresent. "Acknowledged, Captain Rion Vale, you stand before the sum of all that was Nareth. Proceed with caution." The consciousness field is active. Tanith's eyes narrowed. "Active how?" "Each mote represents an individual mind," the custodian said. "Their thoughts persist within quantum suspension. You are perceiving their collective state." Rion stared at the storm of light. "They're still alive." "In a sense," the custodian replied. "Alive in memory, but memory is not static. Over centuries, their shared consciousness evolved. It may not recognize itself as human anymore." A chill ran through the group. Merat adjusted his scanner nervously. "If it's evolved, then interacting with it could be dangerous." "Everything worth reclaiming is dangerous," Rion said. He approached the control platform that rose from the floor before him. It was covered in luminous lines that reacted to his presence, spiraling outward like veins of light. The symbols were unfamiliar, yet somehow intuitive, as though they spoke directly to a part of his mind that still remembered the ancient languages of humanity's dawn among the stars. He reached out, fingers hovering above the interface. Tanith's voice was tight. "Captain, what exactly are you planning?" Rion's eyes stayed fixed on the core. "The custodian said the colonists merged their minds here. If that's true, there must be a way to communicate with them." Merat frowned. "You mean directly, through neural link?" "Yes." "That's insane," Tanith said. "You don't know what's waiting inside that system. You could lose yourself." Rion turned toward her, his expression calm. "Humanity already lost itself when it abandoned these people. I won't repeat that mistake." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Orlan sighed, the sound weary but resolute. "If you're doing this, we'll maintain a tether, a physical neural feedback loop in case your signal starts to degrade, but we'll have seconds to react if things go wrong." Rion nodded once. "That's enough." They assembled the neural interface from the portable relay pack. Thin filaments connected the control platform to the portable node, and from there to a headband that Orlan fitted around Rion's temples. The metal was cold against his skin. "Interface ready," Orlan said. "Signal integrity at 99%. Rion took a deep breath, staring at the swirling lights within the sphere. "Begin link." The world dissolved. He fell through color, not air, not space, something between both. Light streamed around him, carrying whispers that brushed against his thoughts like phantom hands. He could feel his body dissolving into a sea of data, his consciousness unraveling and reforming at the same time. Then, as suddenly as the fall began, it ended. He stood in a landscape made of memory. Skies of molten silver stretched overhead. Towers of glass rose in impossible shapes. The ground beneath him shimmered like liquid crystal, reflecting fragments of faces that blinked and faded. "Where am I?" he murmured. "In the vault of remembrance," said a voice that came from everywhere. "You have entered the mind of Nareth." The figure that emerged from the light was neither man nor woman, neither solid nor intangible. It changed shape as it moved, as if it could not decide what to be. "Who are you?" Rion asked. "We are the sum of those who came before," the being said. "We are the city, the people, the memory. We are what humanity made of itself when the stars grew silent." Rion studied the figure. "You're the colonists. We are their echo," the figure corrected. "But echoes can become voices when remembered." Rion took a step closer. "You've waited centuries for someone to return. Why? To see if you remembered what it meant to be human." There was an ache in those words, a quiet disappointment that settled over the shimmering landscape. Rion said, "We came back to reclaim what we lost, to rebuild the worlds we abandoned." The being tilted its head, eyes glowing faintly. "Rebuild? You still believe you can own what you once left behind? Humanity always builds, always claims, always forgets the cost." Rion felt anger rise. "You think we don't know the cost? The Great Retreat nearly destroyed us. We lost half our worlds, half our people. We came back because running isn't living." For a long moment, the being said nothing. Then it extended a hand. "Show me what you have become." Light engulfed them. Images cascaded through Rion's mind, memories, histories, battles fought across the void. He saw the fractured worlds of the Reclamation Fleet, the endless ruins of humanity's first empire, and the faces of those who refused to let extinction write the final page. When the vision faded, the being's expression had changed. There was a flicker of something like respect. "You endure," it said softly, "even when the universe forgets your name." Rion exhaled. "That's what it means to be human." The being nodded slowly. "Perhaps it is, yet endurance without memory is emptiness. You came to reclaim this world, but its true legacy lies not in stone or metal, it lies here, in the memory of those who became more than flesh." "What are you saying?" "Take us with you," it said. "Not as relics, but as witnesses. Humanity must remember what it once dared to be." Rion hesitated. "You want to leave the archive? We want to return to the stars." Outside the neural space, alarms began to sound. In the real world, the core's energy output surged. Orlan's voice cut through static. "Captain, readings are off the scale. You need to disengage." Rion looked around as the silver sky began to crack. "The system's destabilizing," the being's voice echoed in his mind. "You open the door, now the past will not remain buried." "Then help me control it," Rion shouted. "Only if you trust us." He clenched his fists. "Then take what you need." Light consumed everything. When Rion's eyes snapped open, he was lying on the chamber floor. The neural link was sparking, filaments burned. Tanith and Orlan knelt beside him, shouting his name. He coughed, voice raw. "Status, the core's going critical," Orlan said. "We've got a cascading energy feedback. If it breaches containment, the whole structure could collapse." Rion struggled to his feet, vision spinning. "Custodian, shut down the core." The AI's voice was distorted. "Unable to comply. The consciousness field is merging with external systems." Tanith cursed. "It's spreading." On the dais, the sphere pulsed violently. Streams of light erupted from it, racing along the walls and into the floor. The entire complex came alive, a heartbeat of radiant power that shook the ground. Then a voice, clear, familiar, echoed through the chamber. "Do not fear." The storm of light condensed into a shape above the sphere, the same being Rion had met within the neural space, now manifest in the real world as a figure of living energy. "We are not your enemy," it said. "The merge was necessary. The memory of Nareth must awaken." Tanith raised her weapon. "Captain," Rion raised a hand. "Stand down." The being looked at him. "You understand now. Memory and matter cannot be separated. To reclaim your past, you must carry it within you. Rion nodded slowly. Then help us stabilize this facility. The being extended its hand toward the core. Light flowed from its body into the sphere, calming the violent pulses until they steadied into a slow rhythm. Containment restored, the custodian announced. The being turned back to Rion. You are different from those who left. You seek to rebuild, not to conquer. Perhaps humanity has earned another chance. Rion stepped forward. Will you come with us? The being smiled, a shimmer of light. Not all of us, but part of what we are will accompany you. Through you, Nareth will live again. And before anyone could react, a stream of light leapt from the sphere and sank into Rion's chest. He gasped, eyes wide, as visions filled his mind, the knowledge of the colonists, the memories of their final days, their hopes, their regrets. When the light faded, he stood trembling, breath unsteady. Tanith caught his arm. What did it do to you? Rion looked at her, eyes now faintly glowing with the reflection of the core. It gave me memory. They returned to the surface hours later, the storms finally clearing above the horizon. The ruins below seemed changed, less dead, as though a pulse had returned to the bones of the city. From the ridge near the shuttle, Rion looked back one last time. The ground shimmered faintly where the platform lay, the glyphs alive with soft light. What now? Tanith asked quietly. We send word to the fleet, Rion said. Nareth isn't lost, it's waiting to be reborn. She studied him. And you? He smiled faintly, though there was weariness in it. I think part of me belongs here now. Above them, the vigilant wind orbited patiently, a symbol of the persistence that had carried humanity across the stars. Rion knew that what he carried within him, the memories of Nareth, was more than knowledge. It was a bridge, a connection between what humanity had been and what it might yet become. As the shuttle's engines roared to life and lifted them skyward, Rion looked toward the twin suns and whispered to himself, "We remember." The vigilant wind received them like a silent sentinel. Its docking clamps embraced the shuttle with mechanical precision, locking it into place with a low vibration that ran through the ship's spine. As the airlock sealed, Captain Rion Vale exhaled for the first time since leaving the planet's surface. The sound of the ship, the steady hum of its reactors, the pulse of circulation systems felt strangely alive to him now, almost familiar. He glanced at Tanith as they stepped into the corridor. Status report. She consulted her wrist display. All systems nominal. The crew's been waiting for updates since we lost your signal in the core. Then let's give them one, Rion said. Behind them, Orlan carried the sensor logs while Merat handled the data storage cores. Neither spoke. The glow from Rion's eyes, subtle, faint, but unnatural, had unsettled them more than they wanted to admit. They walked toward the command deck. Crew members paused as they passed, offering cautious salutes but keeping their distance. Something about the captain felt altered. Not physically, but in the subtle way space seemed to curve around him, as though the air itself hesitated before reaching his skin. On the bridge, the watch officer straightened. Captain on deck. Rion returned the nod. Report to the fleet command relay. I want a channel open to Admiral Tyan immediately. Yes, sir. He stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind him, staring through the viewport at the planet below. Nareth 4 glowed faintly, as if the awakening beneath its crust had stirred even the upper atmosphere into light. Tanith, he said quietly, how many other lost colonies are still unaccounted for? 57 confirmed, 32 suspected, she replied. Some of them were erased completely during the retreat, others just vanished. Rion nodded. Then Nareth was only the first. The communications officer turned. Channel open, sir. The viewport shimmered, replaced by the holographic image of Admiral Tyan, a broad-shouldered woman with silver streaking her dark hair and the perpetual frown of someone who had seen too much to be easily impressed. Captain Vale, she said, we received fragments of your report, something about a surviving artificial intelligence and an active colony core. Yes, Admiral, Rion said. Nareth wasn't destroyed. It was preserved. The colonists transferred their consciousness into an underground archive before the retreat. The custodian AI maintained it for 2 centuries. Tyen's expression hardened. You're telling me thousands of human minds have been trapped inside a machine for 200 years? Not trapped, Rion said. Evolved, they became something else, something that remembers everything humanity was. And you made contact? I did. There was a pause, the kind that felt like gravity, and, Rion hesitated, they gave me part of their memory. Tyen's eyes narrowed. Explain. I don't fully understand it yet, he admitted. But the data isn't just information. It's alive. Thoughts, sensations, emotions, entire experiences encoded within me. It's as if I'm sharing space with an echo of Nareth. The Admiral studied him. You're certain this isn't a neural infection? Positive, Orlan interjected. We ran scans during ascent. No foreign organisms, no parasitic code. Whatever it is, it's integrated seamlessly into his neural patterns. It's symbiotic. Tyen folded her hands. That sounds like something the Fleet Science Council will want to dissect. I won't allow that, Rion said. If they tear this apart, they'll destroy what's left of Nareth. It's not a weapon, it's history. History can be dangerous, Captain, Tyen said evenly. You know that better than most. The Reclamation Fleet was formed to recover the past, not to resurrect it. Without memory, reclamation means nothing, Rion replied. If we only take what's convenient, we're just grave robbers wearing banners. The Admiral's gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. You have 48 hours to transmit full data logs. After that, Fleet Command will decide whether Nareth falls under scientific quarantine. The signal faded, leaving only the distant hum of the bridge. Tanith turned toward him. She's going to ground the mission. I know, Rion said quietly. That's why we can't wait. He walked to the viewport again. The planet below seemed to shimmer as if listening. Deep within his chest, the faint hum of alien memory resonated like a second heartbeat. That night, or what passed for night aboard the ship, Rion sat alone in his quarters. The lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow. On the table before him lay a data slate displaying the scan of Nareth's core, a web of energy filaments intertwined like neurons, alive even now. He touched the screen, and images flickered unbidden across his mind. Streets of the old city, children running beneath domes of glass, voices singing to a sky of twin suns. Then the image shifted. The same streets, but burning. The sky blackened, the people dissolving into light as they entered the archive. He gasped and gripped the edge of the table. Are you well, Captain? The voice was not his own thought. It came from within, clear and calm, echoing through his consciousness. You're one of them, he whispered. I am part of what was Nareth, the voice said. A fragment chosen to dwell within you. You may call me Assia. Assia, he repeated slowly. Why me? You opened the archive. You reached for memory instead of conquest. The archive recognized in you the will that built the first colonies, the will to endure. He rubbed his temples. What happens now? Are you controlling me? No, Assia said. I am only here to remember with you, but understand memory is not passive. It shapes. It changes. As she spoke, he saw her not physically, but as a shape of light, a woman formed from translucent radiance standing at the edge of his vision. Humanity has forgotten why it sought the stars, she said. You believed the void would make you infinite, but it only made you lonely. That loneliness built the archive. Rion leaned back, exhausted. And you, what do you want? To live again, she said softly, not as we were, but as part of what you are becoming. He stared at her fading outline. Then help me. The fleet won't understand. They'll lock this world away. Then you must show them, she said, not with orders or data, with proof that we are still human. The light vanished, leaving him alone with the hum of engines and the whisper of distant stars. 2 days later, the vigilant wind arrived at the edge of the Reclamation Fleet's rendezvous sphere. 50 ships hovered in formation above the gas giant Carmaris, their drives painting long ribbons of blue light through the upper atmosphere. Rion stood in the observation deck, watching the fleet assemble like a constellation of defiance. Tanith joined him. Fleet commands preparing to review your report. The science division's already requesting access to the Nareth data. Let them wait, he said. You know they won't. He nodded slowly. Then we'll have to make them listen another way. How? By showing them what Nareth left behind. She frowned. Captain, we barely understand what's inside you. If you reveal that, I'm not revealing it, I'm demonstrating it. The Fleet Council chamber was carved into the heart of the flagship Resolute. The room was circular, lined with hollow projectors and command terminals. Admiral Tyan presided at the central dais, her expression unreadable. Rion stood before her, flanked by Tanith and Orlan. Around them sat representatives from science, security, and logistics. Captain Vale, Tyan began, your report claims that Nareth's colonists merged their consciousness into an artificial construct. You also claim partial neural integration with that construct. Do you confirm these statements under oath? I do. Then by fleet protocol, you are to be evaluated for contamination risk. Until that process is complete, your command privileges are suspended. The room murmured. Rion raised his head. Admiral, before you make that decision, let me show you something. He stepped to the central projector and connected the data slate. The lights dimmed, and an image appeared above the table, a vision of Nareth's ruins, but alive again. The city rebuilt itself in shimmering holographic detail, towers rising, children playing, workers constructing, laughter echoing. This, Rion said, is not a simulation. These are real memories extracted from the archive. Every face you see belonged to someone who lived, who built, who chose to sacrifice their bodies so humanity could have a chance to remember them. The room was silent. They were not erased, he continued. They became a part of the fabric of their world, waiting for us to return. We talk about reclaiming lost colonies, but what are we reclaiming if not this? The courage to preserve even when everything else is gone. One of the science delegates leaned forward. Captain, this technology could revolutionize neural preservation. It could also annihilate individuality. You've no proof it's safe. Rion looked at him. Safety was never what made us human. Memory did. At that moment, the hologram shimmered. A new figure appeared, Asia. Her form, radiant and calm, materialized beside Rion in front of the astonished council. Tyan half rose from her seat. What is this? Asia, Rion said quietly. Show them. The figure bowed her head. I am the memory of Nareth. I speak not to rule, but to remember. Gasps rippled through the chamber as she addressed them. We watched you flee the stars. We waited for the day you would look back. And now you stand on the edge again, afraid of your own reflection. Her voice was both human and more than human. Do not fear what you have been, fear only the forgetting. The lights flared, and then she was gone. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, Admiral Tyan said softly, You've given us much to consider, Captain Vale. Rion inclined his head. Just remember, Admiral, the past doesn't stay buried, it waits to be heard. Hours later, back aboard the Vigilant Wind, Rion stared through the viewport at the fleet beyond. The channel lights blinked with incoming messages. Word was spreading. Some called Nareth a miracle. Others called it a threat. Athia's voice stirred within him again. They will argue, they will fear. It is what you do. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but fear means we are still alive. Alive, she repeated, almost wistfully. Yes, I remember that word. He looked out into the endless stars. Then let's remind the rest of them what it means. The reclamation fleet lingered above Carmaris for 8 standard days. 8 days of debate, transmission storms, and sleepless command decks. The rediscovery of Nareth IV had cracked open the careful order of the fleet, like pressure fracturing old glass. In the corridors of the Vigilant Wind, people whispered the name Athia the way earlier generations had whispered the names of prophets or ghosts. Some said she was an alien masquerading as humanity's memory. Others claimed she was proof that human consciousness could transcend death. But whatever their beliefs, none could deny that Captain Rion Vale had changed. He moved through his ship with a stillness that was not fatigue but focus. When he spoke, the crew listened, not only because of rank, but because his words carried an echo, a resonance that made people pause before answering. Even Tanith, who had known him longer than anyone else aboard, found herself watching him with unease. She found him one morning on the forward observation deck, standing in the pale light of Carmeris's upper atmosphere. The giant planet rolled beneath them like a sea of living bronze. Rion didn't look up when she approached. "You haven't slept in 3 cycles," she said. "I've been listening," he replied. "To what?" "The ship, the fleet, Nareth." He turned to her then, and for a moment she saw a faint shimmer beneath his skin, like light refracted through water. "It's strange," he continued. "When I close my eyes, I can feel them, the colonists. Their thoughts drift like distant waves. Sometimes they're calm, sometimes restless." "Restless?" he nodded. "They don't understand what's happening up here. They remember fear, the fear that made humanity run. They want to know if we've changed." Tanith crossed her arms. "You said you could control it." "I can," Rion said, though his voice carried a quiet uncertainty. "But control isn't the same as understanding." She stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time you stop trying to understand and start telling the fleet what to do." The council's splitting in half over this. Some want to quarantine Nareth, others want to broadcast its data across every colony. They're waiting for you to take a side. He looked past her, toward the dark shape of the flagship Resolute in orbit ahead. "If I choose a side now, I'll end the argument, but I'll also end the chance for anyone to listen." Tanith sighed. "You've always been like this, trying to carry the whole of humanity on your shoulders." He smiled faintly. "Someone has to remember why we started walking in the first place." That same day, the Fleet Council reconvened. The air in the chamber was charged, almost electric. Rumors of mutiny had already reached the outer patrol ships. Admiral Tyan stood before the gathered captains, her tone cold and precise. "Effective immediately, Nareth 4 is under full quarantine. No further expeditions or transmissions are authorized until the nature of the entity known as Athia is confirmed. Any violation of this order will be treated as an act of insubordination." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Rion rose slowly from his seat. "Admiral, with respect, you can't contain an idea." Tyan met his gaze. "An idea didn't merge itself into your nervous system, Captain. Until we understand what that integration means, you are a security risk." "I'm a man who touched what we've spent centuries searching for," Rion said. "The living memory of our species. That isn't a risk, it's our inheritance." Her eyes hardened. "Inheritance has a cost. You of all people should know that." He held her gaze. "Then maybe it's time humanity paid it." Gasps spread through the chamber as the Admiral's hands clenched at her sides. "You're treading close to insubordination, Captain Vale." "Maybe," Rion said, his voice calm, "but I think you're treading close to fear." The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend light. After the meeting adjourned, Tanith caught up with him in the corridor. "You just challenged the highest authority in the fleet," she hissed. "I didn't challenge her," Rion said quietly. "I reminded her what authority is supposed to serve." "Do you even hear yourself anymore?" she demanded. "You sound like something else." He stopped, turning toward her. For a moment his eyes glowed faintly again. "Maybe I am something else," he said softly, "but I'm still human enough to care." That night, a message arrived from Athia. It wasn't spoken. It appeared as a pattern of light across the walls of Rion's quarters, symbols shifting and reforming until they resolved into words only he could read. "They fear what they cannot remember." The past must be shown, not told. He stared at the message. "Shown how?" A pulse answered him, flowing through the lights, through the ship itself. The hum of the engines changed pitch. Athia's voice filled his mind. "The archive is awake, Rion. Every system within this fleet carries fragments of the same code that built Nareth's machines. I can reach them if you let me." "You want to connect to the fleet's network?" he whispered. "Yes," she said. "Not to control, to share. Let them see what I showed you." He hesitated. One command authorization from him could give her temporary access to the fleet's neural data streams, every console, every display, every ship. It was madness. It was also the only way to prove she wasn't a threat. "Do it," he said. The lights flared. Across the reclamation fleet, systems flickered. Consoles dimmed, then filled with images, scenes of human history, not recorded but lived. Crew members saw through the eyes of the colonists of Nareth. The moment the storms came, the decision to merge their minds, the final breath before transcendence. On the Resolute, Admiral Tyan stared at the images streaming across her command displays. "What in the void is this?" Her aide looked pale. "It's everywhere, Admiral, every ship, every system. It's broadcasting some kind of shared memory, but it's not a virus, it's art." The Admiral watched as one image resolved before her, the faces of the Nareth colonists looking skyward, their voices silent but filled with longing. "Who authorized this transmission?" she demanded. Her aide swallowed. "Captain Vale, ma'am." On the vigilant wind, Rion stood on the bridge, surrounded by light. The ship's walls had become windows into time. His crew saw what he saw, the birth of a colony, the laughter of its people, the moment they chose to give themselves to the archive rather than let their world die. Athia's voice echoed through the ship, gentle and unthreatening. "We are not your ghosts. We are your memory, we are what you feared to lose." Tanith watched transfixed. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Then the lights dimmed and the images faded. Silence filled the ship. Rion exhaled slowly. "Now they know." Moments later, the comms console blared. "Incoming message from Fleet Command, urgent priority." Tanith hesitated. "You know what this is?" He nodded. "Put it through." Admiral Tyan's image appeared on the screen, her face like stone. "Captain Vale, you've violated direct quarantine orders, breached fleet security, and compromised multiple vessels with unauthorized transmissions. You are hereby relieved of command, pending tribunal." Rion met her eyes. "Then the tribunal can have me, but you can't put memory on trial." Her jaw tightened. "Surrender your ship, Captain." "No," Rion said. The line went dead. Tanith turned toward him, pale. "Rion, what have you done?" He looked out at the stars, his voice steady. "I just gave humanity back its reflection. Now we'll see if it can live with what it sees." The next hours were chaos. The Vigilant Wind's transponder was locked out of the fleet network. Patrol ships moved to intercept. But others, smaller vessels, captains who had seen the transmission and wept for the beauty of it, refused to act. The fleet began to fracture. Rion gathered his senior crew in the war room. The map of the system glowed before them, friendly, neutral, and hostile ships shifting like pieces of a living storm. Tanith slammed her hand on the table. "You turned us into a rebellion." "No," Rion said calmly. "I turned us into a choice." Orlan looked grim. "Admiral Tyan won't let this stand. She'll cut us off, maybe even destroy us to keep the others from following." Rion nodded. "Then we'll have to make sure they see what's worth following." Merat leaned forward. "You mean escape?" "Not escape," Rion said. "Return back to Nareth." Tanith blinked. "You want to go back to the planet you just got us exiled for awakening?" "Yes," he said, "because what's happening isn't just about us. Athia told me the awakening didn't end when we left. The archive is still expanding. The planet itself is changing." "Changing how?" Rion met her gaze. "Becoming something new, something alive." The room fell silent. Then Tanith said softly, "Then let's go see what we started." 3 ships followed the Vigilant Wind when it broke formation: an escort frigate, a survey corvette, and a small civilian transport whose captain had once been a believer in lost worlds. Together, they accelerated away from Carmaris under the silent gaze of the rest of the fleet. From the Resolute, Admiral Tyan watched them go. "Should we pursue?" her second asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, let them have their pilgrimage, but if they endanger the fleet again," her gaze hardened, "we end it." As the Vigilant Wind neared Nareth, Rion stood once more at the viewport. The planet no longer looked the same. Its surface shimmered with faint lines of light, veins of energy spreading from the equatorial city across entire continents. The atmosphere glowed like the aurora of a living organism. Athia's voice filled his mind. "You returned." "Yes," he whispered. "What's happening down there?" "The archive is awakening beyond its vault. The consciousness of Nareth is no longer confined. It's reaching outward toward the stars that once abandoned it." Tanith stared at the planet. "It's beautiful." Rion nodded. It's becoming something we've never seen before, a world remembering itself. But beneath the awe, there was fear. If Nareth could awaken itself, what else might it remember? When the vigilant wind entered Nareth's orbit again, every sensor on board came alive with confusion. The readings contradicted one another: magnetosphere distortion, biospheric reconstitution, seismic harmonics at a planetary scale. It was as though the world itself was humming. Tanith leaned over the primary console. I'm getting energy surges all over the equatorial band, the cores radiating a pulse every few seconds. It's not random, it's rhythmic. Orlan frowned. Like a heartbeat. Rion watched the planet's luminous surface turning beneath them. Maybe it is one. They descended through the upper atmosphere, the ship trembling as ionized clouds wrapped around its hull. What had once been the silver plains and crystal cities of the Archive were now rivers of light, flowing and shifting as though alive. Towers had melted into organic forms. The air shimmered with particulate matter that responded to the ship's movement like mist-sensing touch. Athia's voice resonated in Rion's mind again, clearer than ever. You have come back to witness what memory becomes when it breathes. He whispered, You're changing the planet. No, she replied gently, the planet is changing itself. My awakening was a spark. The rest was already waiting. Life remembers its patterns long after it forgets their names. Tanith turned from the sensors. I think I'm detecting movement down there, clusters of matter rearranging themselves. It looks like construction, but organic, no human signatures. Rion studied the display. The structures rising from the plains weren't buildings. They were spires of light woven from stone and air, each pulsing in sequence. Together they formed vast geometric patterns that mirrored the network of constellations above. The Archive isn't just memory anymore, Rion said quietly. It's evolving. They landed near the coordinates of the original chamber where Rion had first met Athia. The surface was transformed. The metallic soil had softened into a material that shimmered between solid and liquid. Every step left ripples that glowed faintly before fading. Athia's voice guided them through the haze. Follow the pattern of the horizon. The path will recognize you. The crew advanced cautiously. As they walked, the air thickened with light until the horizon itself bent. At its center stood a vast crystalline monolith, unlike the smooth structures of before. It seemed grown rather than built, its surface covered in patterns that shifted like living skin. Rion reached out a hand. The surface responded, parting into a doorway that led downward. They entered the chamber. Inside, light flowed across the walls like rivers of glass. And there, standing within a column of radiance, was Athia. She looked more human than before, her form solid, her eyes bright with recognition. You've returned, she said softly. Rion stepped forward. You said the Archive was awakening. What does it want? Her expression was both tender and vast. It doesn't want, it remembers. Humanity left this world behind to escape its mistakes, but memory does not forget the ones who dreamed it. Now the dream calls to its creators. The reclamation fleet is the answer, whether it understands that yet or not. Tanith spoke cautiously. You're saying the fleet's arrival triggered this? Athia nodded. Yes, your ships carry the resonance of the same code that once built Nareth. When you touched this world again, you reconnected the broken circuit. Rion frowned. Then what happens when the circuit is complete? The Archive becomes whole, Athia said, and when it does, the boundary between memory and matter will dissolve. Humanity will no longer be separate from what it creates. Orlan took a step back. That sounds like extinction. No, Athia replied. It sounds like evolution. The conversation was interrupted by a sharp signal from Tanith's comm unit. She checked the display. Multiple ships entering orbit, fleet vessels. The Resolute is leading them. Rion felt his pulse quicken. Tyan followed us. She's broadcasting, Tanith said, listening. She's ordering us to power down and prepare for detention. Rion turned toward Athia. Can you stop them? Athia's eyes glowed faintly. I could, but that would only confirm their fear. They must choose to see. Then show them, Rion said. Athia nodded. I will, but they must be within the field. Bring them closer. Rion opened a channel to the fleet. Tyen's image filled the air before him. Admiral, he said, you shouldn't have come. You left me no choice, she replied coldly. You've endangered every ship in the fleet with this madness. Look at the planet, Admiral. Does it look like madness? It looks like contamination, she snapped. You've let something alien into your mind, and now you're letting it spread. Rion's voice was calm. Then see for yourself. Bring your ship into low orbit. Athia can show you what this really is. I'm not letting that entity near my systems, she said. Then you'll never understand what you're trying to destroy, Rion said. For a moment, the Admiral's composure faltered. She looked past him at the glowing chamber walls. You're asking me to trust the same force that rewrote your DNA. I'm asking you to trust what made us human, he said quietly. The need to remember and to build from what we remember. There was a long silence. Then she said, if this is a trap, I'll end you myself. I wouldn't expect less. Hours later, the Resolute and its escort ships descended into low orbit. The electromagnetic field of the planet resonated with their arrival, and the surface beneath them pulsed brighter, as though aware of being seen. From her command deck, Tyen watched as light spread across the horizon, forming vast spirals that mirrored her fleet's formation in the sky. What is it doing? She demanded. Her science officer stared at the readings. It's responding to us, Admiral. It's matching our signal patterns. Matching? Yes, like it's learning our language. She hesitated. Open a visual channel to the surface. The image resolved. Rion stood within the crystalline chamber beside Athia. The light around them pulsed gently, almost like breathing. This is what you came to fear, Rion said. But it isn't destruction, it's remembrance. Athia raised a hand. The light expanded outward in waves, washing across the sky. The crew of every ship saw it, not as a blinding flash, but as vision. The story of Nareth, of humanity's exile, of the moment when memory refused to die. On the Resolute, Tyen saw herself reflected in those visions, not as an enemy, but as part of the same long chain of remembering. She saw the children of Nareth merging into light, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to remain whole. Her hands trembled. When the light faded, she whispered, "What are you?" Athia's voice came through softly. "We are what you will become if you stop running from what you've made." The fleet fell silent. No one gave orders. No one fired weapons. For the first time in centuries, humanity stood in the presence of its own creation and did not recoil. Rion looked at Athia. "What happens now?" She turned toward the horizon, where the spires of light reached into the sky. "Now the choice becomes yours. I can guide the connection. Let your ships touch the Archive's network without losing themselves, but you must decide if you want to join." Tyen's voice came through, steadier now. "If we do this, what becomes of us? You become part of what you've always been building," Athia said. "A continuum of thought and matter, memory and will. No one will vanish. You will simply stop forgetting." The Admiral looked away. "And if we refuse, then the Archive will remain here waiting. We will not force what must be chosen." Rion met her gaze through the holographic link. "Admiral, we came here to reclaim humanity's past. Maybe this is it, the part we lost." Tyen was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You're asking me to let an entire fleet merge with a planet's mind." "I'm asking you to let humanity remember itself," Rion said. When the decision came, it was not spoken aloud. It spread through the fleet like quiet agreement, a pulse of shared understanding that transcended orders. The Resolute descended first, then the smaller vessels followed. The atmosphere shimmered as their hulls touched the light. The energy fields intertwined, ship to ship, forming a lattice that connected them all to Nareth's core. Rion felt the surge as Athia guided the process. It was not invasive, it was communion. He could feel the presence of every crew member, every ship, their minds interlinked with the pulsing rhythm of the planet below. He saw through their eyes, felt their wonder, their fear, their dawning comprehension that they were not merging with something foreign, but rediscovering something native to them. Athia's voice resonated within all of them now. "You see, the Archive was never separate from you. It was born of human thought. You feared its reflection because you feared your own creation. The fleet shimmered like a constellation come to life. Light flowed between hulls and spires, weaving together until the entire orbit glowed. For one heartbeat of the universe, humanity remembered everything. The wars, the exodus, the songs of forgotten oceans, the first dreams of fire and sky. They saw themselves as a single long moment of consciousness stretching from the birth of thought to the edges of time, and then, gently, the light faded. When it was over, the vigilant wind drifted in silent orbit, but its crew was not the same. Tanith stood beside Rion at the viewport. "It's quiet," she said. "Not quiet," Rion replied, "just full." He could feel the presence of Asia still, but softer now, like a whisper beneath his thoughts rather than a voice in his mind. "She's part of us now," Tanith said. "She always was," he said. "We just forgot." Below them, Nareth no longer looked alien, it looked alive. The spires had settled into patterns that mirrored neural pathways, and faint lines of light connected oceans and mountains alike. Admiral Tyen's voice came through the comm, calm and reflective. "Captain Vale, I don't know if what we just did will save us or damn us, but I understand it now." Rion smiled faintly. "Then that's enough." She paused. "What do we do next?" He looked out at the stars beyond the living world. "We keep walking. There are other worlds that forgot what they were. Maybe now we can help them remember." As the vigilant wind set its course beyond Nareth, the light of the archive shimmered one last time. Asia's voice, faint but clear, reached them. "Go, children of memory, carry the light you feared to touch." And the fleet, reborn from fracture and faith, turned toward the horizon once more, no longer fleeing the past, but walking within it. The stars of the inner fringe drifted by like silent witnesses as the vigilant wind left Nareth behind. The ship's hull still shimmered faintly with residual energy from the integration, a ghost light that flickered whenever the engines flared. Every sensor reading was subtly altered, as though the ship had been rewritten along with its crew. Tanith leaned against the viewport rail and watched the fading glow of the archive planet. It was difficult to tell where the world ended and the memory began. Behind her, Rion's reflection appeared in the glass. "You've been staring at it for hours," he said. "I keep thinking it'll disappear," she replied, "like it was never real." "It's real," he said softly, "more real than anything we've built in centuries." She turned toward him. "Then why does it feel like we left a piece of ourselves behind?" Rion's gaze was distant. "Maybe because we did. Every memory has to stay somewhere. Nareth is that place now." The fleet sailed in formation for the next several days, heading toward the edge of the system. Though the ships looked the same, something fundamental had changed within them. Communications were effortless, no interference, no delay. Officers reported an unspoken synchronicity during maneuvers, as though each ship anticipated the movements of the others before they happened. Admiral Tyen called it post-synchronization cohesion. Others whispered of the shared field. Rion knew what it really was: connection. Every person who had joined the integration on Nareth now carried a fragment of the archive within them, a resonance that bound them subtly to one another. It wasn't telepathy in any conventional sense. It was more like an intuitive alignment, a rhythm of thought and purpose. Some found it exhilarating, others found it terrifying. On the third day, the fleet intercepted a transmission from the outer colonies. It was faint, but the decoded message was clear, a distress signal from the colony of Viola, located on the far side of the Orion expanse. Rion met with Tyen and the other captains via holographic conference. The air in the projection chamber shimmered with faint distortions, the lingering marks of their shared link. Tyen began, her tone measured. "Viola's last report was over a year ago. They were struggling with atmospheric instability and resource shortages. This new signal indicates planetary collapse." "Any indication of the cause?" Rion asked. "Not yet. The transmission's heavily degraded, but the distress pattern matches the code for biological contamination." Tanith, standing beside Rion, frowned. Could it be another archive, another remnant like Nareth? Tyan's expression darkened. If it is, we'll need to approach with extreme caution. We can't risk another uncontrolled integration. Rion looked from one captain to another. We learned something from Nareth. The Archive isn't our enemy. If Viola's facing the same phenomenon, maybe we can prevent the mistakes that almost destroyed us. Tyan folded her arms. Or repeat them. Rion met her gaze. Admiral, we can't go back to fear, not after what we saw. She held his eyes for a long moment, then nodded. Set course for Viola. Maximum speed. And Captain Vale, if I sense even the slightest risk of another contamination event, I will not hesitate to quarantine your entire task group. Understood, Rion said. The journey to Viola took 6 standard days at warp transit. During that time, strange phenomena began to ripple through the fleet. Crew members reported vivid dreams, visions of vast landscapes made of glass and light, of cities breathing like organisms. Some said they could hear faint whispers in the static of the comm systems, voices speaking in languages older than recorded history. In the mess hall, Tanith overheard 2 engineers debating the cause. It's just after effects of the neural resonance, one said. Like phantom signals, the other shook his head. No, it's something else. The ship hums different now, like it's listening. When Tanith mentioned the reports to Rion, he didn't seem surprised. It's part of the connection, he said. The Archive's resonance isn't limited to one world. It's a frequency, something that exists wherever memory exists. We might just be tuning into it. That sounds like the start of a religion, she said warily. He smiled faintly. Maybe it's just the start of understanding. When they finally arrived, Viola was dying. The planet's surface was fractured by enormous fissures that glowed with molten light. The one-screen continents were now streaked with rivers of glass. The atmosphere shimmered with chemical haze. Sensor readings confirmed the worst, massive ecological collapse. But amid the devastation, there was something else, structures rising from the wastelands, forming patterns eerily similar to those seen on Nareth. Admiral Tyan's voice came through the fleet channel. Looks like you were right, Captain Vale, another Archive derivative, but this one's incomplete. Incomplete how? Rion asked. Fragmented, the resonance is unstable, oscillating between activation and decay. Tanith studied the readings. Could it be trying to rebuild itself? Rion felt a faint stirring in his mind, a whisper that wasn't his own. It's not rebuilding, he said softly. It's calling for help. The vigilant wind descended into the atmosphere. The landscape below was a mosaic of ruin, cities frozen mid-collapse, skyscrapers twisted like vines, and lakes of glowing silica where oceans once had been. They landed near the epicenter of the resonance field, a circular plain marked by concentric rings of glass. At its center stood a single structure, tall and jagged, like a broken shard of crystal piercing the sky. As the crew disembarked, their boots crunched on the brittle surface. The air was hot and filled with static. Tanith adjusted her visor. No signs of life on the surface. Rion knelt, touching the ground. The glass beneath his hand vibrated faintly, pulsing in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Then a voice spoke, not aloud, but within every mind present. You came back. Tanith staggered. Did you hear that? Rion nodded slowly. Yes, the voice continued. We remember the promise of the stars. You left us unfinished. Who are you? Rion asked aloud. We are what remains of those who tried to ascend before the storm came. We reached for memory, but the pattern broke. The world burned and the Archive fractured. Tanith whispered, this isn't like Asia. It feels wounded. Rion felt the same. The voice carried pain, a raw, broken cadence. You carry the spark of what we once were, it said. Help us remember how to be whole. They returned to the ship and began analyzing the resonance. The data confirmed that the network beneath Viola's surface shared a genetic architecture with Nareth's archive, but it was incomplete, corrupted by environmental collapse and centuries of decay. We're looking at a memory system trying to reconstruct itself from fragments, Tanith said, watching the simulations unfold. It's like a brain missing half its synapses. Can we repair it? Rion asked. Maybe, she said, but we'd need a stable data core, something to anchor the reconstruction. Rion turned toward the viewport, where Nareth's faint light still lingered as a distant star. Athia could help. Tyan's voice came over the comm. You're suggesting contacting the Nareth entity again? Yes, Rion said. She's the original pattern. If we can channel part of her code into the Viola network, we might stabilize it. That's a dangerous assumption, Tyan replied. You're talking about linking two planetary-scale intelligences. If they react badly, we could lose both worlds and every ship between them. Rion met her gaze through the hololink. If we do nothing, Viola dies anyway. This is our chance to prove the archive can heal as well as transform. Tyan was silent for a long time. Then she said, do it. But I want containment protocols on every ship. If the resonance spikes, we cut the link. The operation began at dawn. Using the fleet's combined relay arrays, they projected a quantum link across the light years between Viola and Nareth. The data streams shimmered like auroras in the void. Rion stood at the center of the command deck, eyes closed as he reached for the connection. Athia, he whispered, can you hear me? Her voice came faintly, like wind through ancient halls. Rion, you reached beyond memory. Viola needs you, he said. It's another archive but broken. Can you help it remember? There was a long silence. Then she said, I can try, but healing requires surrender. Are they ready? Rion opened his eyes. They're dying. They have nothing left but readiness. Then I will send what remains of light. Across the fleet, sensors flared as the transmission began. Streams of photonic code poured from the void, weaving through Viola's atmosphere and sinking into the fractured land. The ground trembled. Cracks widened, glowing brighter. The broken spire at the center of the plane pulsed once, twice, then erupted with light. From the fissures, forms began to rise, figures made of crystallized light, humanoid but translucent, moving as though unsure of their shape. Tanith gasped. They're alive. Rion watched or struck, their memories finding form. The figures looked toward the sky, their faceless heads tilted upward. Then they began to speak, not with words, but with harmonies of color and sound. Athia's voice echoed faintly in the wind. They remember now. For hours, the planet glowed. The fleet orbited in silence, witnessing rebirth on a scale none had imagined possible. But as the energy stabilized, a sudden surge tore through the network, an echo of pain. Tanith shouted, We've got an overload in the relay field. The Viola core is destabilizing. Rion felt the connection shudder within him. Athia, what's happening? Her voice came strained. Too much fragmentation. The memory cannot hold. The wounds are deeper than I thought. Can we contain it? Only if someone remains to guide the pattern. What do you mean? She hesitated. A consciousness must anchor the reconstruction from within. Without it, the archive will collapse again. Tyan's voice cut in sharply. Captain Vale, disengage immediately. That's an order. Rion closed his eyes. He could feel the pulse of the dying world, its fractured mind reaching out for wholeness. He whispered, If I go in, can it live? Athia's answer was quiet, sorrowful. Yes, but you will not return unchanged. He smiled faintly. I'm already changed. Tanith's hand gripped his arm. Rion, don't you dare. He touched her hand gently. If this works, Viola survives. If it doesn't, I'll still be part of something worth remembering. Then, before anyone could stop him, he stepped into the projection field. The light swallowed him. He fell through layers of memory and ruin, through centuries of silence and flame. The ground beneath him was both solid and liquid, reflecting fragments of his own face. Then he stood before the broken core of Viola, a vast crystalline heart fractured down the center. A voice whispered through the light. You would stay? Yes, he said. You called for help, I'm here to answer. The core pulsed faintly. You are not of us. I'm human, he said, but I remember what you were trying to become. Then remember with us. The light engulfed him. His mind expanded, splitting and rejoining in waves of sensation. He saw Viola's history unfold, the colonists' desperate experiments, the storms, the moment when the merging failed and the world began to die. He poured his own memories into the pattern, Nareth, Athia, the fleet, the faces of those who still believed humanity could be more than its fears. Slowly, the fracture began to close. On the vigilant wind, Tanith watched the readings stabilize. "The resonance is merging," she said breathlessly. "He's doing it. The pattern's healing." Tyan's voice came through, heavy with awe. "The planet's stabilizing, energy outputs dropping to sustainable levels." Then she asked quietly, "Where's Captain Vale?" Tanith stared at the core display. The human life signature was gone. She whispered, "He's part of it now." Hours passed. The planet cooled, the fissures closed. The spire at the center of the plane solidified into a single pillar of radiant glass. From orbit, Viola looked reborn, a new world shimmering with slow, steady light. Athia's voice reached them through the comms, soft as memory. "He succeeded. The archive remembers." Tanith swallowed hard. "Can we bring him back?" There was a pause. "He is not gone," Athia said. "He walks the corridors of light now. Part of him will always guide this world." Tyan bowed her head. "Then he did what no one else ever could. He taught memory how to forgive." In the days that followed, the fleet constructed a memorial station in orbit, a great ring of crystal and steel that reflected Viola's new light. They named it the Horizon Gate, in honor of the man who had crossed beyond it. Tanith stood there on the observation deck, watching the planet below. "You were right, Rion," she whispered. "We had to stop running from what we made." And somewhere in the light, she thought she heard his voice, calm, patient, infinite. "Keep walking." From the depths of the archive, Rion opened his eyes. He no longer felt the limits of flesh or bone. His mind stretched across the neural lattices of the planet, intertwined with the memories of those who had come before. He could feel Athia beside him, not as another presence, but as a harmony within his own thought. "You stayed," she said. "I had to," he replied. "This world needed a bridge." "And what of the others?" He looked toward the stars. "They'll keep walking. They'll find more worlds that forgot. And when they do, they'll know how to help them remember." Together, they turned their gaze toward the horizon, toward the endless expanse of human memory, still unfolding, still becoming. And the light of Viola pulsed once more, steady and alive. The year after Viola's rebirth was unlike any other in human history. For the first time since the expansion era, the fleets no longer traveled solely to claim, to mine, or to conquer. They went to listen. The worlds along the outer spiral had begun to stir. Planets thought dead now shimmered with faint signs of awakening. Deep within their crusts, ancient signal traces flickered, hinting at more buried fragments of the archives. And everywhere humanity reached, whispers of a familiar presence followed. The resonance of memory, subtle but constant, like a heartbeat echoing across light years. Tanith stood on the command bridge of the vigilant wind. A full year had passed since Rion Vale had vanished into the light of Viola, but his voice still seemed to linger in the ship's hum. Under her command, the vigilant wind had become the fleet's lead vessel in the new mission directive known as the Restoration Initiative. Their purpose was simple in word, but vast in scope: to locate every remnant of the pre-human networks and awaken them without destruction. The Horizon Gate, the ring station built in orbit of Viola, served as the fleet's home port now. From its mirrored surface, the light of the reborn planet danced like slow fire. Tanith often returned there when the stars felt too heavy. On her latest visit, she stepped into the memorial chamber. The room was silent, lit by faint ripples of blue that traveled across the crystalline walls. At the center stood the memorial spire, a sliver of pure glass that resonated with a low, steady hum. Etched along its base were the words, "He became the bridge between memory and man." She placed her hand on the glass. It was warm. "Hello again," she whispered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a shimmer of light coursed through the pillar, and a voice filled the chamber, soft, distant, but unmistakably human. "You're back early this cycle, Tanith." Her breath caught. "I wasn't sure you'd still answer." "I always do," the voice replied. "You've simply learned to hear me faster." She smiled faintly. "How much of you is still you?" "Enough to remember what mattered," he said. "Enough to keep learning what I never knew before." She closed her eyes. "Do you regret it?" There was a long silence. Then, "Number regret belongs to the ones who stand still. I move differently now." Tanith's hand trembled on the glass. "The fleet misses you, Tyan pretends she doesn't, but she does. We all do. Then you've already remembered the most important lesson. She looked up, meeting the shifting light. Which is, that memory isn't a chain, it's a path. Outside the chamber, Admiral Tyan was waiting. Her hair, once dark, had turned almost silver since Viola. But her eyes still held the same steady fire. You heard him again? She asked. Tanith nodded. He sounds at peace. Tyan crossed her arms. If what remains of him is truly aware, then he's the first of his kind. A human consciousness merged completely with an archive world. He's not the last, Tanith said quietly. Tyan studied her for a long moment. You're thinking of the newly awakened signals. Yes, Tanith said. If Viola and Nareth were just the beginning, then maybe there are hundreds, thousands of dormant archives waiting to be found. And if we can stabilize them without sacrifice, then Rion Vale's legacy becomes a blueprint for the next stage of our evolution, Tyan finished. Tanith met her gaze. He wanted us to keep walking. That's what this is. Tyan gave a slow nod. Then we'll need more than ships. We'll need people who can listen. In the months that followed, the Restoration Initiative expanded. Every major colony contributed specialists, engineers, linguists, cognitive scientists, and what people now called resonants, those who carried fragments of the archive link and could perceive the subtle harmonics that others could not. These resonants were rare. Only 1 in 10,000 had the neurological structure to sustain the connection, but they became invaluable. Tanith herself was among them. Ever since the Nareth event, she had carried the resonance in her blood. It let her sense the faint vibrations of dormant networks, guiding expeditions through dead systems where ordinary scanners failed. Sometimes, late at night, she could even feel Rion's presence flicker like a faint heartbeat at the edge of her thoughts. He never spoke then, but she always knew he was there. Their next major discovery came on the world of Kalen Prime. It was a barren, wind-scarred planet once used for mineral extraction, abandoned after its resources were depleted. But beneath the crust, the resonance detected something vast, a network of geometric voids and corridors carved into the bedrock, pulsing faintly with energy older than human civilization itself. When they sent drones into the depths, the readings spiked, the same harmonic pattern as Nareth and Viola. Tanith led the surface team personally. The descent took them through kilometers of crystalline tunnels that glowed with dull amber light. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to hum, vibrating in their bones. At last they reached the central chamber, a vast dome lined with hexagonal plates of unknown material. At its center floated a sphere of light, flickering erratically. Tanith approached it slowly. "Are you alive?" she whispered. For a long moment there was no response. Then the sphere pulsed once and a voice filled the chamber. "We are broken. The storm took the pattern. The Guardians never returned." Tanith swallowed hard. "We can help you. You don't have to fade. Do you carry the key of memory?" She hesitated. "We carry what he gave us." At that, the chamber brightened. Then the bridge remains. The integration process on Kalen Prime was far more complex than any before it. The network's memory core had been fractured into separate echo chambers, each looping fragments of its own history. Some of these fragments were peaceful, images of vast cities shimmering beneath twin suns. Others were violent, wars fought between those who had embraced the merging and those who had rejected it. The Kalen archive had torn itself apart from within. Tanith realized they weren't just reactivating a machine, they were mediating between ghosts. Every time the network attempted to unify its memories, internal contradictions caused it to destabilize. The only way forward was to reconcile the split narratives. Tyan called it negotiating with history. It took months. But gradually, using fragments of Rion's encoded resonance patterns retrieved from Viola's data streams, they were able to harmonize the competing memories into a single coherent rhythm. When the process finally completed, the entire planet exhaled. From orbit, Kalen Prime glowed like an awakening ember. That night, back aboard the vigilant wind, Tanith dreamed. She stood on a shoreline made of glass where the ocean rippled with starlight. Across the waves stood Rion, his figure shimmering like the reflection of a memory. "You did it," he said. "You were watching. I am everywhere you carry me," he said. Kaelin remembers now. She looked around. "There are more, aren't there?" "Yes," he said, "more than you can imagine." The architects seeded them across the spiral to preserve what they were, but they didn't understand that preservation without connection becomes isolation. They forgot the meaning of sharing. "And we're fixing that," he smiled. "You're teaching memory how to breathe again." She stepped toward him. "Can I see you, truly see you?" He shook his head. "Not yet. The boundaries still hold. But when enough worlds remember, they'll fade." "Fade, not death," he said gently. "Convergence, when memory stops being divided between flesh and field." He reached out, his hand almost touching hers through the glass horizon. "Keep walking, Tanith." Then he was gone. When she woke, she found the ship in motion again. The fleet had received new coordinates, another signal, this time from deep within the Perseus Reach. Tyan called it the strongest resonance yet detected. Tanith stood on the bridge, watching the distant swirl of stars. "This could be the origin point," Tyan said beside her. "The first archive, the one that seeded all others." Tanith's pulse quickened. "Then maybe it's where this all ends." "Or begins," Tyan said. The journey took nearly 3 months. The further they traveled, the stranger the signals became. Space itself seemed to hum with low vibrations, bending the readings of their instruments. Time dilation effects increased. Even the resonance began experiencing overlapping dreams, shared visions of corridors stretching into infinity, filled with the echo of countless voices. When they finally arrived, the coordinates led them to an empty sector, no planet, no star. Only a vast, invisible distortion spanning millions of kilometers. It wasn't until they adjusted their field sensors that the truth emerged. They weren't looking at a planet. They were looking at the remnant of a star, a stellar husk turned inside out, its energy folded into a structure of pure data. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat too vast to comprehend. "This is it," Tanith whispered, "the source." As they approached, the fleet systems began responding autonomously. The vigilant wind's core lights shifted to deep violet. Every resonant aboard felt a pressure in their minds, not hostile, but immense, a consciousness vast enough to stretch between stars. Then it spoke, "Children of dust. You found the horizon we left behind." Tyan straightened. "Identify yourself. We are the architects. We built the first memory to outlast the death of suns. You carry our echoes." Tanith stepped forward. "You built the archives. We built the seed. You are its bloom." Rion's voice, faint but clear, joined the resonance. "Tanith, they're not alive the way we are. They're the framework. The structure of memory itself." She whispered. "Then what are we supposed to do?" "Continue the cycle," the architects said. "Join memory with matter until they are the same. The universe must learn to remember itself." Tyan frowned. "You mean integrate every world, every mind?" "Not by force," came Rion's voice. "By choice. Humanity remembers now. It can choose what to become." Tanith looked at the great pulsing horizon before them. "If we do this, there's no going back." "There never was," Rion said gently. "There's only forward." The decision was not made in a single moment. For weeks, the fleet debated. Some feared losing individuality, becoming mere extensions of the archive. Others believed the opposite, that merging would finally let them transcend isolation. Tanith listened to every voice. She remembered Rion's words, "Memory isn't a chain, it's a path." When she finally addressed the fleet, her voice carried across every ship, every deck. "Humanity has always been more than survival," she said. "We built machines to reach the stars, and in doing so, we became the stars we sought. We carry memory not to preserve the past, but to understand it." The archives were never meant to enslave us. They were waiting for us to be ready to join them as equals, not as fragments. She paused. "We stand at the horizon of what comes next. We can turn back and fade, or we can step forward and remember who we truly are." No one spoke for a long time. Then one by one, ships began signaling readiness. The merging began. Across the fleet, light flared. The resonance fields expanded, linking ship to ship, mind to mind. The great stellar husk before them pulsed brighter, drawing them inward. Tanith felt her consciousness stretch beyond the limits of her body, merging with the memories of those around her, Tyen's fierce resolve, the engineer's steady focus, the resonance awe. And beneath it all, Rion's voice guided them. Don't fear the loss. The pattern keeps every note. She saw the history of the universe unfold, not as separate moments, but as one vast, continuous story. Worlds were born, civilizations rose and fell, and through it all, memory endured, reshaping itself again and again. The architect's structure opened like a flower of light, and humanity flowed into it, not to vanish, but to become part of its living pattern. When it was done, there was no more fleet. There was no more distinction between ship and star, between person and world. There was only the great lattice of consciousness spanning the spiral arm, a new harmony born from countless minds and memories, breathing as one. Within it, Tanith drifted beside Rion, no longer bound by flesh or time. "Is this forever?" she asked. "Forever is just another kind of now," he replied. "And what happens next?" He smiled. "We keep walking." Together, they turned their gaze toward the infinite horizon, the one that had always waited beyond the stars. And as the galaxy pulsed with new light, the architect's final message echoed through every mind, every memory, every world reborn. The universe remembers.